Okay, thanks for staying with us. We're back with Kenyatta Arrington, Gypsy Star. He's telling us a story about first meeting Jimmy, and we're at the point where he's discussing the recording of Belly Button Window when Jimmy was working on it, where he actually walked in on the session. Okay, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so what I was saying was when I was sitting behind Jimmy and he gave me this little piece of paper with Jimmy had written on it belly button window, and some of the stuff was scratched off, and some of the words were scratched in and put in, and he asked me what did I think about this, and I was like, Jimmy's asking me what do I think about a song that he wrote, Jimi Hendrix. Wow. So I was really keeping very cool, I think, for underneath the circumstances. I didn't act like a groupie or act like I was losing my mind, even though I was losing my mind, I guess, because of the whole situation. I just couldn't believe that here I was in Electric Lady Studios with Jimi Hendrix. And Eddie Kramer was over there, and Jimmy was still out in the lobby talking with different people. So I looked at it, and I read it, and I said, wow, you wrote this? And I started reading it, and he says, yeah, we're getting ready to finish up the tracks. So then Jimmy handed me a little joint of American flag paper. It was wrapped around American flag paper. I think that's one of your friends that you probably knew years ago, Cliff. And I said, wow, Jimi Hendrix is handing me a joint. So I took a hit and gave it back to him. And that's when we were doing that. I don't do that anymore. I don't do drugs. So anyway, he got up and he went into the studio. He picked up his little guitar. He put his headphones on. And the strangest thing, Jimmy had his back to the whole window, so you couldn't see his head, his face. All you saw was his little head, and he picked up his guitar with these long, lanky arms, he wrapped his fingers, he had very long fingers wrapped around the guitar, and they played back the track. The track was already finished. All Jimmy had to do was just sing, well, I'm up here in this room, looking all around, looking out my belly button window, and I see a whole lot of frowns. And I'm wondering if they want me around. So he started doing that, and I was listening to it, and as I was listening to it, I said, wow, Jimmy's talking about the situation that's going on in his life right now. There's the window, belly button window. And it was on a metaphoric level. He was talking about all many different things at one time, of course, that's Jimmy. But basically it looked like he was talking about stuff that was happening to him in his life there, and talking about if people don't want, they were depressing him, and they were talking about him, and everyone was really in his corner. And if you really wanted him around again, he'd take his time this time. He wouldn't come back right away to the same situation. So I was like really kind of amazed at that. And then he came in, he said, well, let's listen to the Kenyatta's tape. So he gave it to Eddie Kramer. They put the tape on. Jimmy was listening very attentively, and his head was moving. He says, well, I tell you what, let's go do it. So we went into the studio, and Jimmy picked up the guitar.
I mean, just like that, he said, come in, let's go record right away?
Jimmy was like amazing. He could just hear something, and right away, in his brain, he was hot-wired. He already could feel what the song was about.
That must have freaked you right out.
It freaked me out. He listened to it, and he was listening to it very attentively like this, and he said, wow, come on, let's go do it. So Juma was setting up his equipment. Juma took his turban off. He had all these little dreadlocks. I never saw that before, And he set the kunga up. And it was this crazy guy that was hanging around the studio who was begging everybody to give him a ride so he can go get his kunga so he could play on the session, which never happened. And so then Jimmy picked up the guitar. It was in a stand. He had a cigarette. And he took the cigarette and put it up here that he was famous for, putting it on the end of his guitar, which I've tried. And I burnt my little baby. By the way, I want to introduce my little baby. This is Gypsy, and this is Arian. So say hello, Arian. How you doing to everybody? And anyway, so Jimmy picked the guitar up, and he asked me, do you want me to play the guitar? I said, no, play the bass. So Jimmy took the guitar, he put it down. He picked up the bass, and he sat down in a chair, and he remembered all the lines of the song, just like that. And I had the flute, and he set me up with the headphones and everything, and Jimmy started playing it, and we started playing the song that I wrote.
So you and Jimi Hendrix wrote a song together?
We wrote a song together. It was called Mind Your Business.
Oh, that's
And I had this song for a long time. We were discussing it. And how the Mind Your Business got started was out of a conversation. I asked him about why Band of Gypsies came on Capitol Records. Everybody remembers that. The famous, recording on New Year's Eve in 1970 at the Fillmore East in New York. And he said, well, because he had signed these contracts when he was starving, you know, and he owed people certain things, and so they had to give them the album from that, and that's how it started. Now he was like, you know, people just don't want to mind their business. And I said, yeah, people just don't seem to understand it. Take care and mind their business, things would be a lot better.
So this is a song you and Jimmy started working on
writing.
together.
So we started talking about it back and forth, and before we knew it, we were writing a song.
And you were playing flute on his tracks
On
too?
his tracks, and he wanted me to play flute on some other stuff too later on. And so what happened when we got finished playing the music, Jimmy ran back in the studio. He was the first one to leave the door. I could just saw the door close. That's how fast he was. I looked down, I looked up. He was gone. He was in the other part of the studio where Eddie Kramer was.
And behind the board.
Behind the board. And then I came in last, and he was already listening to it, and he was really listening to it very attentively, you know, intensely. He was listening to it, and he was liking what he heard. He started coming up with these other ideas of what we were going to do and where we were going to go with the next session. And so he told Eddie Kramer, he asked Eddie Kramer very politely to give me a copy of my tape. And Eddie Kramer blew out of proportion. He really just blew up. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing anything. I'm living all day, all night. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So he didn't do it. So Jimmy took the tape and he said, man, what is your name? And I said, Kenyatta Arrington. So he started writing my name on the box. And when I looked at the box, I said, Jimmy, my name is Arrington, not Harrington. So he crossed it out.
He called you Harrington, huh?
Yeah, and he wrote the real name. So that box is, you know, part of...
That's part of history, that box.
Part of history. That box is on Jimi Hendrix's official website.
Isn't that something?
You'll be fine.
We have to take another break. We'll be right back.